Tonight, we begin with this question. Would the president's plan get you out of the bailout business? Meaning, does it guarantee that if there's another Citigroup or Goldman Sachs teetering on the edge because of its greed, your tax dollars won't be used to prop it up? The president says yes.
The goal is to make certain that taxpayers are again on the hook because a firm is deemed too big to fail.
Now, the top Republicans in the House and Senate say the president isn't telling the truth, and so does a Democratic congressman joining us tonight, Brad Sherman of California, a member of the House Financial Services Committee. Also with us, CNN national political correspondent Jessica Yellen and CNN senior congressional correspondent Dana Bash. Welcome all. And Congressman, I want to get straight to this key debating point, and I want to again bring the voice of the president into the conversation, because as you know, the White House is pushing the Senate bill and agrees with most of what's in the Senate bill. The president went up to talk to Wall Street today, and he assured the American people in that speech that they would not be in the bailout business. Let's listen a little more of the president.
What's not legitimate is to suggest that somehow the legislation being proposed is going to encourage future taxpayer bailouts, as some have claimed. That makes for a good soundbite, but it's not factually accurate.
And again, among those saying it does, especially the Senate bill, does guarantee endless bailouts, the House Republican leader John Boehner, the Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell went to the floor today, and again, he backed off his rhetoric a little bit, but he continues to pose that big question.
Yes, the bill says taxpayers get the money back later, but that sounds awfully familiar. Isn't that exactly what we did with the first bailout fund? A bailout fund Americans were promised would be repaid, but which Democrats are now trying to raid in order to pay for everything else under the sun.
Let me ask you a simple question, Congressman. Who's telling the truth? Is Mitch McConnell right when he says it's endless bailouts, or is the president right when he says that's a good soundbite, but it's not the truth?
Well, regardless of who was right today, tomorrow the president will be right. I just got off the phone with Senator Dodd. I have been working with him. My staff's been working with his staff to deal with Section 210, more specifically 210N10 of the bill. And the senator has agreed to changes that will prevent borrowing by the FDIC that could have been enormous. I don't know whether this is a technical change or a policy change, but in any case, the FDIC will only be able, when it takes over a defunct entity, they'll only be able to borrow 90% of the value of the assets they've taken over, so that they have the liquidity to wind that entity up. And that is considerably different just by taking a couple lines out of Section 210.
Now, you had called that bill and that specific part of the bill TARP on steroids. You believe that the Senate bill would get us down this path again. You're saying now that Senator Dodd has given you his assurance that the language will be changed, and if a Citigroup, a Goldman, somebody's teetering on the edge, the FDIC steps in, it cannot use more taxpayers' money than that firm is worth. So if it had to sell the whole thing the day after tomorrow, the taxpayers would not lose a dime.
Exactly. Now, there will be money collected in advance from Wall Street. But that's Wall Street's money. That's not taxpayer money.
But this doesn't change your criticism of the Federal Reserve's involvement in giving some taxpayer money to these institutions.
Well, there are two other things I'd like to change in the bill. One is to deal with a statute that's been on the books since 1935, that's been used by the Fed to risk up to $2 trillion of our taxpayer money. Now, Bernanke has been good in that he has not taken big risks. He's lent an enormous amount of money, but only on very secure basis. But other chairman of the Fed could use Section 13.3 in the future. You can't blame that, the existence of that section on this bill, but this is a bill that can cut back the bailout powers of the executive branch.
And Dan, let me bring you into the conversation. Based on your reporting, if the change that Congressman Sherman just outlined, that Chairman Dodd has agreed to, that has been one of the key sticking points of the Republicans in the negotiations, saying, Mr. President, you don't get one of our votes, let alone 10, 12, or 15, or maybe even 20 of our votes until you change this. Is that enough?
It's not going to be enough. There are lots of other issues, but that is a big issue. When you heard Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, talking about the fact that there still are taxpayer bailouts in this bill, this whole issue of the FDIC, meaning you and me, the taxpayer, being on the hook for creditors was still a big issue. You feel that that was pretty much taken care of?
I've done my own analysis. I can't speak for McConnell and the Republicans. They may focus on...
But you did agree that was an issue that they agreed with you on, or you agreed with the Republicans on.
I've done my own analysis.
We're not going to get you to say that.
I don't want to be strict on this, but this is one of the things. Let me just jump in for one second. Yeah, I understand your point. You're a Democrat and you're trying to be a good Democrat, but this is one of the things people don't like about Washington, is that if they're right, why can't we say they're right? Mitch McConnell, in your view, Mitch McConnell, maybe his language, rhetoric might have been hyperbolic, but on the point, he was right, in your view.
Well, in his biggest requested change was to move in the wrong direction. If I read him correctly, he was saying, don't collect the money from Wall Street in advance, but it's okay
That's a separate issue.
Right.
That's a separate issue, specifically on the question of taxpayers being on the...
I'm not sure that the change he was focused on the most would have exposed taxpayers to even more risk. And the change that Senator Dodd and I have discussed will keep taxpayer money from being put at risk for the failing institution. Now, I did talk to Senator Dodd about this Emergency Financial Stabilization Fund, which is not for failing institutions, but could also put taxpayer money at risk.
And let me ask you this then, because based on this, we'll continue the conversation in a minute, but before we take our first break, based on these changes being made tonight, we've spent all of our oxygen this week looking at the Senate bill, which, of course, like health care, would have to be married up to the House bill. If the Senate bill changes in the direction you say it will tonight, will we have to a point where there is a compromise in sight, or will we have, like health care, a Senate bill, a House bill, and then Lord knows what in between, trying to find a compromise?
Well, the health bill was an extraordinary circumstance where you had 60 Democratic senators where it passed, but only 59 Democratic senators when it was time to go to conference, so we didn't go to conference. This bill, I think, should be handled in regular order. The Speaker has been very clear. We go to a conference, we iron out the differences. There are aspects of the House bill that I think are much better than the Senate draft, especially in dealing with that 1935 statute that concerns me, that has been the biggest risk of taxpayer money, albeit it's been treated conservatively by Chairman Bernanke.
Right, we'll continue the conversation in a minute, more on the policy of this and on the politics of this as well. But first, our look behind the numbers. Wall Street gained about 30 points during the president's speech, but investors' reaction was generally ho-hum. The Dow Industrials ended the day about 9 points higher. We're also seeing the trickle-down effects of the big banks' big profits. They've set aside more than $39 billion for their employees' paychecks, a 9% increase from last year, the first quarter of 2009. And get this, they also have money to spend on lobbying, $6.6 million in the first quarter. We'll dig deeper into that number when we come back. Back again, Democratic Congressman Brad Sherman of California, CNN national political correspondent Jessica Yellen, and our senior congressional correspondent Dana Bash. Let's talk more about this debate and how different it is. Yes, there's a big policy difference, but politically it's very different from the health care debate. And you had an example in the Senate today where the Democratic senators called the press conference and they started playing video of Republicans saying things about this bill, essentially trying to call them and saying these are not true. Now, the Republicans, of course, would disagree, but the Democrats had a very aggressive strategy, and as they played these videos, Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, wanted to make this point.
Bottom line, on the health care bill, we allowed too many lies to get out there without rebuttal because we thought they were so obviously untrue. But we've learned our lesson. And the minute these things come out of the mouths of some of our Republican colleagues, we rebut them. And we rebut them again and again.
Congressman, to you first, since you're in the middle of the politics, a lot of people make comparisons to the last big debate, and that was health care. Democrats handling this better? With more discipline? Obviously, you disagree with some of your Democratic friends about some of the language.
Well, I think this is going to be at least a 60-vote bill in the Senate, so it'll probably end up being a 70-vote bill. I expect substantial Republican support. The politics of this bill are different in two ways. First, we need 60 votes, which means that we need some Republican support. And second, we have much broader public support. You can argue, we'd like to argue that a lot of Americans like the health care bill, but there was a strong rebuttal to that. Yeah. Americans want us to control Wall Street. Now, it's a 1,400-page bill, and it's up to us to talk about the details of the bill. But they want derivatives controlled. They want consumer protection. They want higher capital requirements.
So you have a win you didn't have in the healthcare debate.
Exactly. There are a lot of Republicans who want to vote for a good Wall Street bill. I'm not sure they wanted to vote for health care.
And do you guys see that in your reporting, in the sense that, remember, a week ago, Republicans were saying no, 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 and then all of a sudden Senator Shelby was back in the room negotiating, Senator Corker was pushing, negotiating. Something happened where the Republicans said, let's get back in the room.
They see the train leaving the station. I think the congressman is right. Republicans see the train leaving the station. But what was so interesting to me about the Democrats and their political tactics today, you just played that from Senator Schumer, that they are so intent on learning the lessons from health care, really how they botched the politics of health care. I was told by Democratic sources the goal is define or be defined. So that's why you heard that very, very harsh rhetoric from the Democrats, which belied what's going on, which is, as the congressman said, really earnest bipartisan talks.
And the other piece of this is they approached this very differently even from the beginning. The administration, unlike healthcare when they were endlessly criticized for never presenting a plan to Congress, the administration gave almost 800 pages of legislative language to Capitol Hill last summer on Wall Street reform and has been quietly working with Democrats behind the scenes. So they knew all along what the White House wanted. They guided this. Big difference.
Also working behind the scenes are lobbyists for these financial institutions that don't like a lot of this. And I want to put some numbers up on the screen because there are new numbers out from the Center of Responsive Politics, which does a great job tracking the money in our political system. First quarter Wall Street lobbying, the first 3 months of 2010, as this bill has been being debated in Congress. Goldman Sachs lobbying up 70%. Morgan Stanley, this comparative to last year's first quarter. Morgan Stanley up 50%. Wells Fargo up 46%. Bank of America up 38%. Morgan Chase and Citigroup up in the teens. Congressman, you're on the receiving end of this. We could argue this is America. They have every right to lobby their elected representatives, but you could also look at that list and say a lot of those people got taxpayers' money, and they can say we paid it back. But is it unseemly, the process, or is it how it works?
Well, they haven't been lobbying me all that much because I was against TARP to begin with. They don't have me in their persuadable column. And I think they've paid back the TARP money, but the key thing for us to do.
But when you walk the halls, are you proud to be a member of Congress when all this is happening? Or are we wrong to say, oh my God, look at all that money being spent to lobby? Is it just the American way?
It has been the American way. We have a political system we're used to, and it certainly has some problems. Perhaps public financing would be a good direction to go in, but they have a right to have their voices heard. It's just
You've been critical of this bill, though. Are they getting something for this money, in your view?
Less and less. I would say that I wasn't a real fan of the original White House proposal, or rather Treasury Department proposal. I think we made major changes in the House. We're seeing the Senate move in the right direction. And on issues this big, that are front page day after day, 50 lobbyists per member are less important. It's on the issues that the public isn't focused on where lobbyists can be effective.
All right, I appreciate the conversation tonight, Congressman Brad Sherman, Jessica Yellen, Dana Bash. Thanks so much. We have a lot more to learn about this, and we'll continue as it apparently moves through the Senate, and then maybe you'll let us sit in on some of the conference committee hearings, Congressman.